Hey there, my name is Pravus and welcome to Hearts of Iron 4 by Blood Alone. We are starting up a new achievement run today, of course playing as the Italian nation since this is the central focus of the latest DLC. But this is not going to be your standard Italian run. Oh no, Vanilla Mussolini? Patuch, that is boring. Instead, we are going to be playing with what is probably the most ridiculous, memeable, ahistorical national focus path that Paradox has ever added into this game. And that's saying something. There is a hidden focus tree within Italy. I say hidden, at this point the cat's out of the bag, right? People found about this pretty early on, it's all over Reddit and YouTube, but we're gonna try it anyway, where basically you want to deliberately destabilize your nation in just the right ways to eventually put the Pope in charge and create a new glorified Papal State, with which you can then conquer the entire Mediterranean if you play your cards right. And there are a couple of achievements to pull this off. So, that's what we're going for today. The new kingdom of God on Earth in, ideally by about like 1939, 1940. It's gonna be amazing. Of course, we will be playing this in Iron Man mode. I know my camera's in the way. Don't worry, it's gonna happen. And here we go. Now, if you watched the video that I released on release day 4 by Blood Alone, you already have some idea how the new Italian focus trees are going to work. Of course, we do start off at war in Ethiopia, and we do have these war escalation mechanics to worry about. We also have Mussolini giving me some missions that I gotta meet within a certain time frame, and how we perform during that initial invasion is going to determine which of the political national focuses we will start with. You make solid progress in Ethiopia, okay, you move down this middle tree over here, you can strengthen Mussolini's power. This is usually a pretty good route to take. But we have to go for the struggle in Ethiopia if we want to take on the Pope. I mean, I say have to. You can ignore that and actually still make solid progress in Ethiopia. You can eventually depose Mussolini regardless, and you can form the Papal State. But it is a heck of a lot faster, for more than one reason, to go down struggle in Ethiopia, and I'll explain a bit more about this in just a little bit. So this is what we are going for. That's going to lead to the convening of the Grand Council, deposing Mussolini, and then choosing a new leader. We need to go down the monarchy route over here on the right, and then once we have an absolute monarchy with all centralized authority with the king, we're going to seek the support of His Holiness the Pope. At some point, we give the Pope enough power. That's it. And there's a whole bunch of secret focuses that you can't see until certain prerequisites are met. So that is going to be our goal. Now, the fastest way to end things with Ethiopia and get the whole struggle, you could just sit here and deliberately perform terribly until like the clock just kind of runs out. Or you could just withdraw from Ethiopia. Take all these troops, send them all back home. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Within the first week, we'll be done with this and we can bypass a whole bunch of focuses. And of course, I'm going to continue doing a lot of our standard opening moves. We need to build up at least a handful of factories. Let's choose some technology. Of course, we want to get our production, our construction, our electrical, mechanical engineering, blah, blah, blah. And then your fourth pick, it doesn't matter too much, but I'm going to go for the survivability studies to unlock armor for planes. I've done a lot of testing in dogfights. It turns out armor and air defense, really pretty good. Let's get a whole load of guns going. I want to get some support equipment. I don't think I need much in the way of light tanks or trucks. We could continue building up the basic close air support, but not the interwar. Forget that. Let's toss a couple extra factories over into that, and maybe also start building up some efficiency with artillery. We're going to need all of this, and of course, I'm probably going to go for an infantry-heavy army, at least for a good long while. And for good measure, I'm going to go ahead and just delete all of my current air wings, send them all back into the stockpile so we can kind of reorganize and get them to some decent numbers. And then for my navy, I'm just going to go ahead and join them all up into one big death stack. We'll separate all of this and make it a little bit more efficient later, but for now, I'm feeling lazy and I don't want to have to deal with it, so let's just get rid of it. Now you might say, why aren't you picking a national focus? Because there's no point. We're about to overwrite or bypass the Ethiopian war logistics by simply ending the war in Ethiopia and going for a white peace. So there's nothing to pick here, and I don't have anything I can pick down here, so I might as well just wait a week. I'm not going to lose anything. We can choose some new focuses in just a minute. Let's go to speed 5, and the troops should be retreating right about now. There they go. They're getting into the boats. Ethiopia is taking a few pot shots at them, but that is a-okay. And we've already met the prerequisites by simply losing some land in the states we were holding in Africa. We wait for 15 political power, click the button, and boom. We're basically saying, whoa, 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 time out, okay? This war in Ethiopia, this was a mistake. This was a big Italian oopsie. Mussolini is an idiot. So don't worry about it. We're pulling back. Leave me be. And of course, the Ethiopians are going to say yes. Now, here's where you would normally make a decision, right? If you want to go down the left path over here with the communists or the Democrats, you would go for the change of leadership. This actually fires off the Abyssinian fiasco, so you can go down this route. But we need struggling Ethiopia, so I have to choose a staggering failure. Doing so bypasses a handful of focuses. We no longer can get the free spy agency and spy. That's sad, but oh well, not a big deal. And in just a moment, we're going to find out that the Ethiopian war logistics is bypassed as well. The next focus we have to take is convene the Grand Council. This is going to get me some political power, lose some stability, but most importantly, it's going to get me an advisor that I can hire that gets me passive, non-aligned support. You might feel tempted to go for Undermine the Duce, or is it the Duce? I think it's the Duce, and Conspiracy in the Shadows, and these are tempting because of national power. Do not pick these up, okay? This is a thing that a lot of guides online and YouTube actually miss because the game changed since those have been released. It used to be that you could rush down here to strengthen the papacy, and this was one good way to do that. And by the time you finish this, you had to click like one button, spend some political power, shift the balance of power a little bit more toward the Pope, and boom, you were done. No longer the case. If you look at Seek Papal Support, when we do change up our national balance of power mechanic, it's going to set that balance of power straight up at 0. That means once we pick up both of these and we do a couple of events, maybe even go for disband the black shirt so we can condemn fascism, you're going to end up just on the cusp of being able to put the Pope in power, but you can't. You can't get there unless you wait for one full extra year. If you're willing to take your time, this is completely fine. However, weird little thing that not everyone knows. Undermine the Deuce, this would move the national balance of power toward the Grand Council of Fascism. These are the only two focuses that will update and actually shift power toward the Pope. If you hold off on these until the papal balance of power isn't set, you can actually speed run the papal states. That's what we are going for here. I know. It's confusing, it's frustrating, but that's just the way it's gonna be, all right? Something else I think I might go ahead and do is just release some territory down here as little vassal states in Etruria and in Somaliland. We don't really gain anything by holding on to this. This is just gonna become a liability and a pain to deal with in Africa at a later date. So I think, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just release these guys as some puppets. And I think that's gonna be a very controversial decision, but that's what I'm going for. I just don't want to deal with them. We're not going to release Libya, though. This I actually need to hold on to. So what are the achievements we want to work for as the Pope, right? There's two of them. One, if you play as the Pope and you can take on Moscow, occupy that. I think it's just occupy, not capitulate. You get an achievement because Stalin, you know, is the famous quote of the Pope. How many divisions he's got? Well, it turns that on its head. Stalin, how many divisions has he got? That's the idea, right? Then there's another one. If you can take over the entirety of the Mediterranean and form the Roman Empire, you are, in fact, Holy Roman and an empire. And there's an achievement by that exact name. And that is what I'm going for. That's going to be the hard part, though. Forming the Pope, not too hard. Taking on the USSR, really tough, annoying, but overall pretty doable. Finding a clean, nice way to take over the entirety of the Mediterranean, that's going to be a trick. The Grand Council has been convened. Excellent. All right, so what do we want to do next? Well, normally this is where I would say go for undermining to get some extra political power, but no. You could say let's go ahead and depose Mussolini right now, but I actually don't recommend that for a couple of reasons. If you get rid of him, you get rid of a relatively good leader with some nice national bonuses, and instead you get the Grand Council of Fascism, which only has downsides. You lose political power, you lose stability. There's no advantage to having these guys right now unless you are ready to immediately move on to forming the Kingdom of Italy. So we're not going to depose him. We're going to hold on to him for a little bit longer and instead go ahead and turn our attention to some of the economic focuses with things like Italian highways. That is going to lead to the Ministry of Italian Africa, which gets me a lot of political power, and it would get me a better form of occupation policing force. By the way, I recommend very strongly at the beginning of every game, you get off of civilian oversight right away. Move to that local police force. Something I have not realized, I did not realize at least, when I first started playing with Italy after this DLC released, is when Paradox said that resistance was going to be a lot worse and more painful, they weren't kidding. It is way worse. That's actually one of the reasons I wanted to release these guys as puppets and not waste my manpower and equipment on them. You really should start with police force or secret police to get that resistance down low, and then only start transitioning to a civilian oversight once their resistance is already at a very low level, which we're at with Croatia and Greece right now. So I'm happy to swap these guys over. But yeah, it makes a lot more sense, like thematically. You shouldn't start with civilian oversight. It used to be you could just ignore the garrison mechanics, and as long as you had enough manpower and guns, you could just power your way through it. That's no longer the case. You really have to pay attention to that. With electronic mechanical computing being done, let's go for this over here. Keep stacking up that research speed. We can actually get a 5th research slot fairly early on. Italians are in a surprisingly decent position as far as their ability to build up a civilian economy and get research going pretty darn quickly. It's kind of nice. Colonial police we will make use of. It's only good in Africa in this case, but it is a better version of the local police force for us. It doesn't hurt your compliance as much and it reduces resistance even further. So if we have any African holdings, this is always worth getting. In my case, it only affects Libya, but that's fine. Now, let's go ahead and grab that staunch monarchist we have been talking about, and for our next focus, we are going to go ahead and work down some additional economic focuses. I would like to get some additional civilian factories. I would like to get some military factories. I'd like to also get things like the army primacy, so we'll be able to start boosting up our military, because we're going to be going for some early aggression in this particular game. For now, let's go ahead and start by grabbing a couple more civilian factories. Might as well boost that up. There's actually a pretty shocking number of consumer goods reductions focuses. If you play as Italy. Like, most of them are temporary, they last for 1 or 2 years, but nonetheless, you can actually get a lot more factories pretty quickly. It's nice. All right, so we've got that done and out of the way. Let's go ahead and start working on probably the support weapons followed by the radio. I think that would make some sense. I'm gonna start saving up some political power. You might say, why? Well, there's a couple options. One, if we want to start getting non-aligned support, an easy thing you can do is go ahead and start doing raids against communists and Democrats, or just outright ban their parties. I do want to ban communism early on if we can. It's kind of nice. Another thing, though, before we swap over to becoming a non-aligned monarchy nation, we could get things like the war economy, and this isn't going to go away as long as our war support is nice and high once we do form that monarchy. So I want to pick this up before we get rid of Mussolini. For now, though, let's go ahead and start by banning communism while they're relatively small. That means as we start raiding the democratic parties, it's not going to split between 3 ideologies, but instead between fascism and non-aligned. That's going to result in me getting a fair bit more. We don't absolutely have to rush to become the Pope. You could play the normal Italian game, start by conquering the Balkans and ideally Turkey as well, if you can, and then become the Pope, man. That is certainly a tempting option, but I'm not really worried about that this exact second. Basic machining tools, sure, let's get the dispersed industry next so we can keep boosting up our economy. And any week now, we should see the Spanish Civil War fire off. That's the steel industry for a couple more factories. Could continue working on some of this over here. This, by the way, is what leads to the consumer goods. This one's permanent, really good. This one is temporary for 2 years, but also still really good. And then there's the research slot. So it's not really hard to go ahead and pick some of these up. I do think there's something to be said about going for the foreign affairs a little bit early. This is, weirdly enough, one of the focuses that does not update with the papal balance mechanics, and it only impacts the Grand Council of Fascism. So there's no reason to wait on this one. It does get me some more of that political power that I need to move on to something like the war economy. Let's go ahead and pick up probably the railway innovations, just keep focusing on the economy. We'll circle back around to the military in a little bit. I'm gonna get up to 50 political power, and then we're gonna go ahead and start some anti-democratic raids. This is gonna speed up the non-aligned just a bit. So now instead of 0.10, we're going up by 0.14. Okay, it counts for something. Once we have become monarchist, I can also do anti-fascist raids, and that's gonna very rapidly start getting rid of this. So you have to get to 25%. That is the magic number in order to go for the monarchy. The question is, do you want to rush for the monarchy? Or do you want to wait till you're closer to, like, let's say 33, 35, 40%, and then by 50% you can go for power to the king, and you need this in order to go for the papal support. The answer is we probably want to rush this once I get close to 25. Construction tech is done. I guess I will pick up the radio. Always a good thing to have. You want the coordination and reinforce rate, and there's a civil war. All right. So with the Civil War, normally you would support nationalist Spain in this, and they're probably going to win as it is. I instead am going to support Republican Spain, because here's the thing, it does not matter to me one iota which one of them wins. At the end of the day, they're good Catholics, and they'll probably end up serving the Pope. You'll see in a bit. So if I'm gonna choose one side or the other and it doesn't matter, I'll choose the one that's gonna give me some sort of a small benefit. If we can help Republican Spain survive for a bit, then we will be able to maybe get the Spanish Gold, which is 1 year of reduced consumer goods. So I will send them 3 tank divisions plus some air volunteers. Good enough, off they go. They shall accept, and my tanks will arrive. Okay, if I'm gonna be on the side of Republican Spain, the goal is to get down here and split the north and the south from each other as quickly as I can. Sometimes the AI is really slow to react, and you can just march through here, split them up, and then help the Republicans actually crush the south. Then they've got enough numbers, they can actually win up in the north. But it doesn't always work that way. There's a lot of luck involved once these two AIs get fighting. So if I lose, I'm not really worried about it. It would just be nice. So here come my tanks. We're going to try to cut through this. Let's make sure that we have air support where I need it. That's not it. So let's go ahead and swap over here, and bada boom. Okay, this is the best that I'm going to be able to do for now. It either works or it doesn't. Regardless, ooh, they're pushing. They're going to encircle these guys really freaking fast, aren't they? Uh-oh. Like I said, there's a lot of randomness involved here. Railway innovations are done. How are we doing on non-aligned? We're up to 23%. I probably can do one more focus before I need to worry about this. So I guess we could go ahead and depose Mussolini, like, right now. But I also think I can afford to wait just a smidge, because I still want to get things like the war economy. Let's pick up the foreign affairs before we get things like the consumer goods reduction. Get that political power up and running and go for war economy. There we go. We have successfully split the North and the South armies from each other. If the Republicans are very, very careful, we can start actually crushing this large group. It would be very helpful, obviously, if I'm able to take the port in Cadiz. Not always likely to happen. For now, I'm just going to hold on to this for a little bit, but I'm not terribly invested. This is just a really good way to actually keep these guys alive for a bit longer. Okay, so we have the foreign affairs done. We'll worry about things like Balkan ambition in a bit. For now, let's go ahead and depose Mussolini and then rush toward a new kingdom status. Also, let's go and get the war economy up and running right now. That'll stick around, and that saves me even more consumer goods. For some additional research, what do we want? Great question. Doesn't really matter too much in 1936. I guess a bit of artillery is not a bad idea. Getting everything I care about here, I guess we can go ahead and pick up the synthetics. That is something I feel like we're going to need, some more passive local oil generation, plus eventually some rubber, so I can field out a few more planes. Okay, we have deposed Mussolini. We are going to go for the Monarchy d'Italia, which is going to put a new king in charge, which is not half bad for us, so we like this. Again, the goal now is to start rushing toward that 50% mark for our non-aligned support. I'm going to hold on to just a little bit of political power. I guess if we wanted to, one thing I could do is actually work toward extensive conscription a little bit early. But I don't feel like this is nearly as important as the war economy I already grabbed, so nah, let's hold on to some political power so I can go for something like anti-fascist raids as soon as that becomes available. Finish with the mechanical computing. Let's see, it's almost 1937. Let's go ahead and pick up some extra construction tech and probably get the extra factory output just straight up. I do need to be producing a lot. You need so much equipment these days because of the way the occupation mechanics work. Hey, Monarchy d'Italia is done. Anti-Comintern Pact. I don't see any reason not to join this. We're going to be on the side of Germany for at least a bit, and I don't exactly like the filthy atheistic communists in the Soviet Union, or at least the Pope's not going to. We'll be fighting them for an achievement, so I figure there's no reason not to do that. All right, so now we are unable to move on to the power to the king for at least a little bit. We're still not going for the undermine. Don't worry about that. Let's go ahead and pick up probably some extra factories and consumer goods. And then I also really want to get this army primacy up and running. It's just going to be really important to get some military factories because I'm doing some early wars. Down over here, the anti-fascist raids, absolutely. I don't see any reason not to. That's going to be really strong. Actually, what I should have done was first gone for the old figurehead at 135 political power, because a lot of the advisors we had access to were fascist only. Now they're gone. So I have a whole new bunch of people. That's why I didn't pick up any additional advisors. It's actually one of the downsides of being non-aligned. Some of your best leaders and stuff also are fascist only, so I can't even use most of these guys. Like, who cares about cavalry, anti-submarine, and all that? Like, this is terrible. It's all awful. How are the Republicans doing? Generally not bad now. We've more or less held this area off. They've got at least one small cutoff over here. That's going to free up a bunch of troops. The big thing that can mess these guys up now is obviously going to be Aragon, but again, I'm putting a lot of time in this because this is what's like happening and what's exciting right now. It doesn't matter. I'm just waiting for the Spanish gold. Another thing I'm going to do is go ahead and start training up some units if I can afford them, because it's going to take a while, and I feel like having more people is helpful. Now, here's a weird little trick that I've observed. Normally, right, if you went down things like the Foreign Affairs, and then you went for the Balkan Ambitions, if you're playing as the fascists, you have an option to demand Yugoslavia get subjugated, and they almost always say no. Weirdly enough, once you're officially a non-aligned nation, they almost seem to always say yes. So I'm kind of counting on turning these guys peacefully into a vassal so I don't have to worry about fighting a bunch of folks. For some people, that would suck, because you want to go fight Romania, you want to take them as a puppet, you want that oil. It's very nice to have. However, as long as we're fighting somebody like Greece, or Turkey, we'll have an option to go after these guys eventually. Now, one downside of becoming non-aligned besides all that, we no longer can justify war goals until the world tension spikes up to 50%. If you're worried about that, you could start fabricating claims while you're still fascist, but the thing is, unless you do what Feedback Gaming did for his speedrun trick, which is to say, start staggering up, let's say, 2 claims, then start a third on Turkey, then cancel the other 2, so this one takes 2 years, it's not going to time out where you're in a position to do anything with those claims. Instead, I'm rushing for the Pope because the Pope is going to get free war goals on all of these guys. Well, not Turkey, but all of these guys over here, which is really nice. So I figure that's a faster solution to my problem, and it's more consistent. Okay, we have at least some civilian factories and consumer goods reduction. I could double up on that, but I'm actually going to go ahead and split the difference and go for some military factories before it's a little bit too late. Not too late, really, but I'd like to just go ahead and do that so I can start ramping up some artillery production a little bit sooner. Looks like the nationalists have been able to snake through here because these guys are morons. Of course they have. Right, well, I need to try to hold on to this somehow, but I also need to send some troops up here and try to split these guys off. I don't know if they're technically connected and able to get supply that way, but this is not allowed to stay. No, 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 no. Something else I'm going to go ahead and do with some armies, I'm going to find a lot of these irregulars and militia, and I'm going to try to just convert them to become new army templates. These guys are just, like, pathetically weak. Not that my existing units are particularly good either. They're actually really bad, but I just don't see any reason to hold on to this. It's going to make everything look good, like you got a whole lot of numbers, but in reality, they're terrible, and you find you just sent some really weak troops to the front line, and then you die. There's the Regional Defense Council. Okay. Yeah, the Republicans are whiffing this really good opportunity I gave them. I don't know how they left a hole in here to deal with all this, but, yeah, now I'm in a really bad spot, and they're definitely joining things up for supply, which is making this really difficult. So somehow I've got to be able to get in here, and they're just making this worse. Republicans, how did you mess this up? For real. This was completely winnable, you were A-okay, and then you had this screwed up, and now my tanks are in danger. Great, bud, thanks. Morons. Okay, so there's the army primacy. Could go for some more. How are we doing as far as our non-aligned support? We're up to 42%. Not yet at a point where I want to go. I can't do any more anti-democratic raids, so it's really just against fascism at this point. Okay, so we're still holding off on this then. Balkan ambitions, we'll worry about that in a little bit, though I could go ahead and work toward things like Albania. It is 1937. Instead, I'm gonna go ahead and grab even more consumer goods reductions or more military factories. I mean, I do love the idea of going for earlier infantry weapons, so let's go ahead and pick some of that up. How are we doing logistically? Right now, I'm just losing out on artillery. That's why I needed the extra factories so we could start building this up. The anti-fascism raids are doing their thing. We're only going up by 0.05 now per day, though, so this is definitely taking a while. Banning Democratic parties would more or less get me there, to be honest, which is highly tempting. I hate losing 6.4% stability is the only problem. How close are we to getting these guys above 10%? Once these guys are above 10%, we can actually do another anti-democratic raid, and that actually works better for me, so let's go ahead and wait for this to get up there. Spanish gold reserves! Yes! That's it, that's all I needed. Now we can pull back if I have to, which is good because I am actively being surrounded by these idiots. We could actually get just cheaper artillery in general, which is not a terrible plan. I do like that. Of course, I do still like research slots and extra consumer goods, too. Let's get the consumer goods so I can continue ramping things up. We're starting to get a pretty good amount of civilian factories in position. I do want to create a spy agency before I forget. If we're gonna go against the Soviet Union, you know you want to have some spies, and yeah, I'm gonna lose some gosh dang units. I have done so many test runs trying to figure stuff out with Spain, or rather, sorry, with the Papal State, doing the Spano-Civil War, and I have never seen the Republicans whiff this badly if I've managed to cut these guys off. They completely botched it. Let's get the interwar artillery, just because getting some extra boosts there is almost always a good thing. There's the anti-democratic raids. Let's pick that sucker up. And now we should be going up by, once again, 0.09. That's going to help me a lot to speed up. Construction tech is done. Let's go ahead and pick up that radar. I think that's still worth it. And June 1937, I'm going to go ahead and pick up things like supply companies, military police, recon, and so on. All these are things that ultimately I'm going to want to have at some point, so while we're kind of in a lull, I might as well go for that. I could go ahead of time on something, but meh. By the way, what's happening over here? All of a sudden, there's a rally down to the south. Go figure. And they immediately lost this rally because they broke the front lines again. God. We've expanded the fields. How are we doing? We are 49% of the way there. We're very, very slightly off. I guess I could do one more focus. Could go for devaluate the lire, which is going to get me some more consumer goods reduction, but I don't think I need that this second either. Let's go ahead and pick up Balkan Ambition. This is something I know that I want at some point anyway. And then as far as another advisor, let's go ahead and pick up the Captain of Industry so I can build out these factories even faster. We've also got our synthetic oil experiments. That's great. Once I start building some of these, I'll worry about getting some extra oil and rubber and so on out of that. Anything else really important to me? I'm going to want cannons at some point. We'll come back to that, though. Already getting everything I care about here. I do need to get things like welded armor at some point. That's going to be important, but let's start with the military police. We actually could have totally waited just a little bit and not picked a focus for like 10 days, and we probably would have been able to move on directly to the stronger powers. Oh well, like I said, this is something we're going to need at some point anyway, so it's not a huge deal. Let's go ahead and work toward the power to the king, baby! And this is going to finally get me on track to then turn on those papal mechanics. Once I have those active, it's time to start aggressively pushing toward Rome. Well, I say Rome. I mean Church of Rome. Vatican City? Y'all know what I mean. Logistically, how are we looking? For the most part, okay. We're actually producing a fair bit of artillery plus support equipment. You know one thing that could be good, and I really wonder if this is actually part of the meta now. Armored cars? I used to always ignore these things because, like, why bother? But now with resistance being what it is, I kind of wonder if there's a very good reason to be going for some of the armored cars just so you can put down resistance without costing yourself an absurd amount of equipment. We've got free civilian factories. Ooh, okay, that means I want to go ahead and make sure I get myself some oil production. And then after that, I think we just go ahead and go ham on military factories. It's time. We need to start militarizing our economy. Power to the king is done, and the next thing we do is seek some papal support. So this is going to reset, like I said, this whole balance of power thing. This didn't used to be the case. If you picked up this next focus and it swapped over to a papal system, you started 25% or whatever else already toward the Pope. It made it very easy to form. Doesn't do that anymore. That's why we need to get this as fast as possible. Let's edit our infantry template just a bit. It's only 12 combat width right now, which is kind of garbage. I can at least bump that up a little bit. If I want to make these guys into artillery focused, I would do one more usually. We don't have enough artillery yet, so let's get these guys up to at least 18 combat width. We'll add on some artillery and stuff a little bit later. While we've got a little time before war, I'm going to go ahead and just start training these guys up. Might as well get their XP where I need it to be. You can see here we can send that ultimatum to Yugoslavia. That is something I'm going to want to do. Here's the fun thing. It does not count as me justifying a war goal. Therefore, the UK and team are not going to be allowed to start doing some guarantees of independence. I would be very sorely tempted to go for the justify war goals, but again, I'm not aligned. I can't. Figuring out the timing of when you should justify versus when you shouldn't, when you should swap from fascist over to non-aligned, that's been quite a trick for me. I'm really just banking on not needing to do it at all. I'm going to get a whole bunch of free claims in a bit. Turkey is the only one I really wish I could find a good way to attack without having to fight the allies. It really would make my life so very much easier. Anyway, we're about to get that papal support, which gets me even more non-aligned popularity, plus we're going to start getting some political power gain and stability and so on, which is going to be very, very helpful. And bada boom. Okay, so just like that, here's the proof in the pudding. 0%. Totally resets. Next things we need to do, would be to expand the Lateran Treaty, and we'll go ahead and do this now. It cost me 70 political power, so let's do that. Send more power to His Holiness. But then, let's take a look up over here. Undermine the Deuce. There it is. The douche gets reduced. It's gonna be moving toward His Holiness. Weird, right? Because those are the only ones that do it. It's so easy to miss. This one still says the Grand Council of Fascism. I don't know if this is a mistake on the part of Paradox or not, or if this is intentional. It kind of makes sense. We're undermining the king instead of Mussolini. So yeah, we need to do both of these. This is going to translate into an extra 25% boost toward His Holiness. We also need to continue down the agents of the church, strengthening the papacy, and I'm pretty sure I also need to do disband the black shirts. Maybe. So let's go ahead and start. Let's start with the agents of the church, just in case I can find other ways, but it doesn't really matter. We have to pick up all of them. And very soon, we will become that papal state. I'm going to end this video here, though, because this is so far going very well, and I want to end things on a high note. Let me pick up one more thing. Let's go for... it's almost 1938. Do we want to go ahead of time on this? Not quite that much. Let's go ahead and pick up these supply companies. All right. Thank you all for watching. Hope you're looking forward to this series with the new Kingdom of God. If so, I would ask you to hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notify bell, and I will see you guys next time.